Hello guys and welcome back to a new video. In this video I want to basically give you guys information on how to make an interaction component. So how can you make an interaction component that's easily reusable, whether it's a first person or third person game, to interact with any type of object in the world. And what we're also going to act is that the object can basically determine what it wants to say to the player. So if I look at this object and it were to be a door, then it could say press E to open the door. If this object here were to be something that I could pick up, then we want the object to say press E to pick up. We're going to make this in a very simple and modular way. It's also replicated, so multiplayer ready. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, I am here inside of the first person example template from Unreal Engine, and I'm using 5.4.4, so the latest version right now. So here we go. The first thing we have to do is that we are going to make ourselves a little folder here, and we're going to call this interaction. And in there, we're just going to basically be putting all of our interaction stuff. So a couple things that we need is, well, we need a widget to display that we can actually interact with something and to show ourselves a little crosshair. So we're going to click user widget, call it widget blueprint interaction. Then next up, we're going to be needing a little component. So we're going to go up here to blueprint class, and then we see actor component. And this one we're going to call BPC, so blueprint component interaction. Then next up, we're going to need to make an interface. So we're going to go to blueprint and then blueprint interface and call it BPI for blueprint interface interaction. Hit save on these. There we go. And then last but not least, we're going to make ourselves a little macro library. So if we go here to blueprints, then we see here blueprint macro library, and we're going to be making that for the actor component. So this is called BML, Blueprint Macro Library, and then actor components. So there we go, actor component. And then to get started, let's actually go ahead and go make that widget real quick. So it's going to be a fairly simple widget. We're going to be starting with an overlay. So under panel, we see overlay. This goes full screen. Then inside of that overlay, we're going to be putting an image, which is going to be our crosshair. So I'm also going to be renaming it to crosshair image. Now this is fine if it's just a white dot like that, but it shouldn't be that big. So we're going to make it 5 by 5 pixels and put it in the center of our screen. Hit compile and save. Then next to that, we're going to be dragging here a little horizontal box into the widget. We're also going to center it, but then we're going to offset it to the right here with 250. So on the left, we give it 250 padding to get it here to the right. And inside of here, we're going to be dragging, let's see where it is, a border. And this border in it is going to have some text. And the text, we're going to set it to say E. So that's basically your interaction text. And then this border, we're going to wrap it with a size box and make it a size of 25 by 25. So if you click here on override width and height, we're going to do 25, 25. Then this border itself can be white, so that's good, but we're going to remove the padding. So the padding on this border, we're going to set it to nothing. And then the E here, this one, we're going to set it to center. And also here, center, center. We don't need it to have padding. And then the font, we're going to make it a bunch smaller. So let's try 16, and we're going to make the color black. So yeah, something like that. Perhaps we want 14. There we go. Then we're going to hit compile save. And then actually let's make it 16 because 14 is kind of small. And then next to this size box in the horizontal box, we're also going to drag some text. This text, we're also going to make it 16. And we're going to give some padding between this press E and the text. So if we click it and go here to padding, we can do something like 15. Or let's say 20. Yeah, that looks good to me. And then here is going to be our interaction text. So first of all, it's going to say E to interact. And then the text itself, when it is selected, we're going to make it a variable because we want this text to be able to change. So we're calling it interaction underscore text. And we're going to turn on that this is a variable so we can actually code it when it has to change. Then the text itself, let's center it like this. So that's good. And this horizontal box, let's do that too, actually. There we go. Then we're going to go into the graph of this widget. And over here, we're basically going to go to class default and then scroll down here on the left, and we're going to set it to collapse. So by default, this widget is going to be in your screen, but it's going to be collapsed. So we basically can't see it. And then if we hover over an object that we notice that we can interact with, then we uncollapse it. That's essentially the simple logic that we're going to do here. So all that we're going to have to code is if we go to our event graph here, then actually we can remove all this. We're simply going to make a little function and we're going to call it update underscore widget blueprint interaction. So that's what it's called. And then we're going to give it a pin here. So one pin is going to be visible question mark. And the other pin is going to be interaction data. So here we go, interaction data. And we're going to make this a string. There we go. Then we're going to hold B and left click to get a branch. You can also just drag off here and type in branch. It's the same. And then we're going to be setting the visibility for this widget based on the visibility. So if it needs to be visible, we're going to do set visibility. And then it's going to be not hit testable self only. If it shouldn't be visible, so alpha false, we're simply going to collapse it. And then here we're going to be setting our interaction text. So that's this one. So we're going to do set text. So whenever we want this widget to be visible, we're going to set the interaction text to this interaction data. Put that down here. That's it. Then I see that our crosshair image is actually a variable. Images do that by default. We don't need that, so we can turn this off. Hit compile, save, and that's it for our interaction widget. Then next up, we're going to open up our interaction interface over here. And we're going to be making two functions. So let's make this bigger. So the first function, we're simply going to call it interact. So if I double click it here, we can rename it to interact. And we're going to put it in the category of the similar name to what we call this interface. So BPI interaction. And the next function is going to be called get underscore interact data. And this, we're going to put it in the same category. Now first, we're going to make this interaction function over here. So double click it. And then over here under inputs, we're going to give it two inputs. The first one, we're going to call it player that interacts. And the second one, we're going to call it server interact. So is this the server or is it the client that's interacting? Now this player that interacts over here needs to be of the type actor. So we're going to type actor, object reference, and that's it. Then we hit compile and save, and then we go over to our get interact data. So this function over here. And for that one, we're only going to be adding an output here of the type string. And this we're going to call interaction text. So we just need this function to return interaction text as data. There we go. Then we can actually go ahead and close that interface. Then next up, we're going to be going into our macro library, and we're going to be setting up one little macro that we can reuse within any actor component to get a reference of a widget that we want to communicate with in the future. So let's go ahead and set this up. So it's a bit of a weird function or, well, macro. So first of all, we're going to hold S and get a sequence and plug this into here. Then next up over here on the first one, we're going to type in get all widgets of class. And we're going to turn off top level only. Top level basically means the widgets that are currently visible on your screen. Well, we don't only want to get those whenever we want to get a reference of widget. We also just want to get references of widgets that might be collapsed, for example. This widget class, we're going to plug it straight into this one over here. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to drag out of this array and we're going to type in is not empty. So if we find a widget that is of our widget class, then this should not be empty. And in that case, we then want to get a reference of this widget. So here we go and plug this in. So then we type in get here, we get a reference of the widget that we find. And then we basically want to return this. So if everything goes well and we find it, then we go into true here. And then we basically return this, and we're going to call this widget ref. So that's the reference of whatever widget we are looking for. Now in the case that, for example, you trigger this macro, but the widget hasn't actually spawned yet, so it's not on your screen, which can occur in multiplayer and classes need to start up. Then we're basically going to be retrying this for a certain period of time before we say we're going to time out. And if we time out, we're just going to call it that this function failed. So on the failed event here, we're going to basically click adding another output. That's going to be an executable, and we're going to call it filled. So if we don't find a reference, we're going to wait for 1 second, and then we're going to do this n times. So if we hold n and left click, we get an n gate here. And the amount of times that we want to do this is basically our timeout period. So we're going to plug this all the way in here. We're going to rename this n to timeout. And by default, if we click here, we can set this to 10 seconds, which is a nice timeout period. Then this one goes into the reset. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a messy macro here, but that's fine. Now, if the counter is equal to our timeout, so we're going to get this line. If you double click it, you can get it like this. If it's equal to our timeout, then we basically filled. So if we then hold P, left click branch, then we can say that we filled. If it's not equal to our timeout, then we still have time to try it again. And in that case, we're basically going to plug our false all the way back here. Then if we double click our line, then we can make everything look a bit nicer. Just like this. So yeah, it's a bit of a messy function, but it works. And it's a beautiful one once it works. So here we go. Yeah, so that's the setup basically. So one more time, we're looking for this widget class. If we find it, we simply return a reference of it. If we can't find it yet, then we want to keep trying until we find it for the amount of seconds that we plugged in here, by default 10. So we're going to try it once, then it's not equal to 10. Then we're going to try it again. If it takes longer than 10 seconds, we're just going to say this filled. This one can now be closed as well. Actually, we need to rename here the macro name. So we're going to name it get widget reference. And the category is going to be the same name as the actual macro library. So PML actor components. There we go. All right, this can now be closed. And then we go ahead and set up our actual component for the interaction. This one, we're going to be linking to the character class. So here we go, open this up. Now we're going to code the interaction logic in here. So the first thing that we want to do on begin play is that we want to get a reference of this interact widget. So to do that, we're going to drag off here and type in get widget reference. And then the widget that we want to get is actually this one. So widget blueprint interact. So we can set that up here. And then we want to cast to this widget. So we're going to cast to widget blueprint interaction and store a reference to it so that we can communicate with it. So we're going to drag out of here, click on promote, and then as widget blueprint interaction is actually fine. Then next up, we're going to get event tick. And then on tick, we basically want to fire a line trace into the world. So it's going to shoot a line trace that's going to check if we hit objects that we can interact with. So this one, we're going to call it interaction trace as a function. And then in here, we're basically just going to be coding the trace logic. So out of here, we're going to type in line trace by object, or actually by channel. So line trace by channel. And then we need to do some mathematics to shoot a line trace forward, which is fairly simple. So all we type in is get player camera manager. Now out of our camera manager, we're going to do get actor location. Then out of here, we're yet again going to do get actor, but then in this case, forward vector. Now this actor location is going to go into our start. And then we're also going to do actor location plus, and then this forward vector times the distance. So if you just do a time sign, times the distance that we basically want the line trace to shoot. So this goes in here. And then if you right click this one, we can then convert this here to a float double precision. And this is going to be here, or single precision, doesn't matter. This is going to be the length of the line trace in centimeters. So 250 centimeters means 2.5 meters, which for a first person, that's a pretty decent length. So that's all we're going to do here for now. And then let's make this look nice a bit. Yeah. So all these settings are good by default. If you want to see your line trace shooting forward, you can set this to a certain duration so that you can actually see the line trace in the world. And we're simply going to be tracing for the visibility channel. So there's no specific collision channel like an interaction channel or something that we need. So out of here, we're going to say, okay, if the return value is true, that means that we hit something, but then we need to determine if we hit something of the interaction interface type. So what we're going to do is open up the hit result here basically, and then the hit actor, we're going to drag out of here and type in does object implement interface, and the interface that we want to check again is our pre-made interaction interface. So in the case that this is true, then we basically want to store a reference to that actor that we hit so that we can then interact with it. So how do we do that? We drag out of hit interact again, type in promote, and this is going to be called our interact actor. So in the case that we hit one, we save it like this. Now in the case that we don't hit one, we want to check if our interact actor is valid. So we're going to drag it in, click on convert to validated get. And then basically out of the no hit result, we're going to do this. And if whatever we hit doesn't implement the interaction interface, we're going to do this. And what is it? Well, if the reference to our previous interaction actor is still valid, we want to invalidate it. So we can do that by simply dragging it in and setting it. So you hold Alt and you drag it in, right? Or just drag it in and you type and you click on set. So there we go. Then we basically want to unset it. And then if we do hit something of the type interaction, we then want to get the interaction data out of it to display it in our widget. So out of here, we're then going to type in get interact data message. So this is our interface, and this returns the text of that actor that we can hit. So for a door, for example, this can say open door. If you look at the dog, it could say pet the dog, whatever, right? Then we're going to get our widget blueprint interaction reference here, and we're going to call that function that we made. So update widget blueprint interact. This is going to go into here, interaction text into here, and we're going to say that we want it to be visible. Now, if we basically make it invisible, right, then we're going to go here and we're going to set it to invisible. And the reason that we do this validation here is, well, this function is going to be called on tick. So in case we don't have a valid reference, then we don't do anything, right? So it doesn't cost much performance. If we do hit something, or if we did have a valid one, we only one time make it invalid, and then we're going to go off of this tick again. So that's also clean and nice and performant. So there we go. Hit compile and save, and then we're going to hook this function up to our tick. That's that. Then next up, we need to code the actual inputs to be able to, call the trace here. So you could either set up the new inputs, right? So you can go over here to inputs and set up some inputs here, but that's just a button that you're going to be clicking on your keyboard. So for now, for demo purposes here, I'm just going to type in here keyboard and then E. So E is the button that we wanted to press. Here we go. So whenever we press E, we're going to see if our interaction actor is valid. So are we hitting something that we can actually interact with? Well, in case that that's true, then the actor that we interact with, so this reference, we want to then call our interact interface message here. So if this is valid, we want to call it. And then the player that's interacting is the owner of this component. So whatever we attach the component to, for player character, for example, that's the one that we want to interact with the object. So now the object that we interact with has a reference of us as well. So this obviously happens locally. So I offline press E and then I can have an offline event here. So let's say that you want to interact with a door, but you don't really want that to go over the web, or I mean to go over like multiplayer. Then you can simply interact like this offline. So imagine you want to interact with a door and just have a noise going towards the player that it basically feeds back them that you clicked the door. Then you don't necessarily have to do that over replication. So that is for this interact. But then we also want to have the option to interact over the server. So we're going to make a custom event called SR, which stands for server _ interact. And this, we're going to run it on the server reliable. And here we're basically going to get the same interaction event. And then we're going to just plug it in here. And this one also plug it in here. And we're going to say that, well, if we are on the server, then the server interacts is true. And this one we're also going to call here. So we're going to do SR interact. There it is. And then the same stuff goes in here. and then hit compile and save. So now we both have, whenever we press E on an object that we can interact with, we have an offline event going to that actor and a server event going to that actor. And now on the actor specifically, we can determine which one we actually want to consume or use in that case. Now we can go ahead and close this. Now all we got to do is we got to make an actor that we can actually use the interaction on. So for that, we're going to go to blueprint class actor, and I'm going to call this BP_base interaction. So this is our base interaction actor. And literally all we have to do here, so you can turn any object into an interactable like this, you go to class settings, then we go here to implemented interfaces and type in interaction. Hook this up. So now we get the interaction interface here. And then for the interact data, we can promote this to a variable. So if you double click the function, we can promote this to a variable, and that's called interaction text. And then if we click on the little eye here, we can actually expose it to the world. So by default, we want it to say interact, and there we go. Hit compile, save. But now that we basically click the eye, we basically made it instance editable. So what does that mean? If I drag this one in the world here, and this is, for example, a door, then I could say here, instead of interact, I could say open door. And now that actor would display open door whenever we look at it. So yeah, click that eye and then make it a variable so that we can easily change it in any child blueprints. And then next up, you could add anything here, like static meshes and such. But we are going to do that in a child. So this is the base. We're going to then right click and click here, create child blueprint. So let's call this one BP TV. So this is an imaginable TV. And in here, we're going to add a static mesh because it's just an example. And let's make it, actually, let's make it this blue cube like this. Okay, so this is our TV here. Then if you click on class defaults, we can then say toggle TV on/off. Where's my slash? Here, /off. So there we go. So now basically, if we drag this into the world, this is now a TV that we can interact with. All we got to do now is hook up our interaction component to our character and set up our widget blueprint interaction here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go locate our player controller, and this player controller on begin play on the client side. So we're going to do is locally controlled or locally is local player controller. Here we go. So in case this is the local player controller, we're going to do create widget. And we want to do this only once to be sure. So do once widget blueprint interaction. And the owning player is self as the player controller. And we're going to add this to the viewport. So there we go. And next up, we're going to locate our first person character. We're going to click on components and we're going to type in interact. So here we got it. BPC interaction, hit compile and save. So now if we click play, then we now have the working interaction component. So if I look at this actor here, we see the actual crosshair. So whenever I look at anything that is collision of this actor, it basically shows me that I can interact with it. And then I can press E here to do something. So when I press E, I'm sending an interface event to this actor. And then if we want to instance this one, so I can duplicate it, I can make this could be a dog. So I can then say pet. So then we can see how simple that is. So this one now says toggle on off. This one now says pet. So how do we then handle an actual event, an actual interaction event? Well, for that, we're going to go back to our blueprint of our TV here, and we're going to implement the interaction interface. So if this is an interface that is local, we could simply say we hold B and left click to branch. And then if it is not on the server, we could say play sound. So now if I basically, or we play a sound at the location, play sound at location. And I don't know what kind of sounds are in here. Okay, so first person sound. So we do get actor location. So yeah, now if I walk up to, what did it say here? Oh, we need to do get actor location. There we go. Plug this in here, compile, save. So now if I walk up to it, I can offline, I press E and I hear this noise. So that's all good. So now that is basically set up. But let's say that you wanted a multiplayer event to happen. Well, then first of all, the actor needs to be replicated. So we're going to go to class defaults. We're going to set replicates is true. That's basically fine. And then let's say that we want to swap out the static mesh whenever we interact with it. So we get the static mesh, we say set static mesh, and then we're just going to do a little flip-flop. And we want this to multicast, so we want it to happen on all. So we're going to do custom event, MC, interaction event. So multicast here, we're going to do multicast reliable. And then the server is going to be calling this multicast, so MC interaction event. Here we go. So on the server side, we basically want this to, I don't know, first turn into this ball, and then second turn back into the cube, for example. So now we made a multiplayer interact here. So we got 2 players, and then as a listen server. Then we see here our server on the right, it says it here on top, and our client here on the left. So now if the client or the server, so server walks up to it, presses E, we see it turning into a ball. And then if the client walks up to it, presses E, we also see it turning into that ball. So there you go. So obviously you can code any interaction event that you like, but this is the basic setup of how you can set up interaction for your multiplayer game or single player game. I hope you guys liked it. If you want to see more of these types of videos, then simply leave it down below what you would like to see. If you want to get this project so that you can use this interaction component yourself, you can download it on my Patreon, including other things. I got a whole Battle Royale tutorial series there that you can also get. It's all under the same one-time membership, basically. And you guys can check out my game on Steam called The Anomaly Project. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this, give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!